Hello, everybody. I'm Marianne Kleinhans. I'm your host for today's SIG Arch Conformance meeting on February the 2nd, 2022. And we would ask you to please abide to the CNCF code of conduct and respect each other and be your best self. And this meeting will be recorded to YouTube, so you can view yourself doing all those things later. So I will share my screen and share. No, that does not show what I wanted to show. Let's stop the share and share the screen. Oh yes, it did show what I wanted to show. Yes, it's showing my, okay. So looking at the agenda. So John, sorry, I didn't react earlier to let Eleanor know about the move as well. So if you want to go with your topic, you have.
Okay, great. Yeah, so one of the things that we do as Sonabuoy, right? Obviously, we run the EDE conformance suite by default, but we do play with the tags a little bit. So, right, by default, we run the conformance tests that are non-disruptive. You can run the full conformance suite. You can run just like maybe one quick test to check the cluster is kind of up and running. But we've got some requests, one in particular that made us start thinking about this a little bit more. Really too, but one was about like networking and saying, you know, there's a lot of networking stuff we would like to test that's maybe even slated to eventually become conformant. It's pretty, to us, like basic functionality. Can we test that? But the problem is like they can't just grab the tag SIG networking because it just grabs way too much. And they don't want just the conformance tests that overlap with SIG networking, because they would kind of like the idea of, well, what about the things that are maybe going to be conformant in an ideal world, right? I know one of the things, right, the primary thing that this group covers is things that should be conformance tested but aren't. Is there a way to know what tags that covers? Can I share my screen real quick? I know you're sharing yours. Can we trade back and forth real quick?
Yeah, yes, you can. Let me stop my share.
Okay.
Stop share.
I made this little.
I will have to make you
Oh, I'm a co-host.
Co-host moment. More. Okay. My co-host. You are the co-host now. So please share.
Fantastic. Thank you. So you can see my terminal now?
Absolutely.
So Sonabuoy now has this little EDE command, which just kind of bakes in the dry run. So we have the conformance test list so that you can more quickly identify what tests you're going to run. But then also a way to change, rather than listing the test, we can also just list the tags and the number of times those tags occur. So like if you're running just the conformance suite, you can see here are all the different tags you might hit, which by itself is somewhat interesting. If people want to look at these things, like some of them, there's one random test marked fast. But for instance, if someone is doing, you know, SIG networking, there's all sorts of other test patterns that may or may not be relevant to almost any but alpha clusters, right? And it's hard to know how these tags are going to evolve over time. And I'm wondering if anyone has thought of this idea of kind of preemptively going and marking these tags as like eventually conformant or something like that, to where we know a certain test or a certain feature is eventually going to evolve into that. I don't know which one of these features are right now only marked as feature because they're not yet tested as conformant, or if it will just always be optional. I hoped you guys could provide some insight onto that, looking at the conformance tests and adding more and more to those over time.
There was some effort at one point to look at the metadata for the KEPs, because the KEPs have, I believe, the feature name as part of the data, to be able to see at what stage in the development cycle that particular feature is, so we could automate some information on that data.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. If anybody else has got thought, that's the only place I can think of that we have the data and we've talked about it before, but maybe there's other meetings I'm forgetting.
I mean, Are most KEPs, would you say, even always on this track of hopefully eventually becoming GA? Or be like some of those test
Fortunately,
tags
no.
are like, it's always optional. We know
Sometimes it's exploring something and they never intend it to go past alpha.
Uh-huh.
There's another whole discussion area around this is intended to stay in alpha because this is always a feature for supporting alpha development. I don't remember the exact specific use case for that. Dems looks like he might have a recollection.
Yeah. I think we add something as alpha just to give a toggle for people to try things on, in the sense that, we want the default to be something else, but if they want the old behavior, we would give them a switch for them to use the old behavior, and we would do that as an alpha, and then we rip it out. I remember doing it at least for like some timeout situation. Was it probe timeout? I guess that's what I'm remembering. Yeah. So okay.
We added features GA intentionally, but it was like it was never intended to be conformance. It's just a way to disable, like, return to previous behavior.
Right. And the other related problem here is, there are things like RBAC, which by definition, which everybody uses, but we can't add it to conformance suite because it's an optional feature. So we have those kinds of idiosyncrasies too.
Yeah, that's kind of the core one. Some that will just always be either an optional toggle or a one of many choice, like provider AWS, provider Azure. You will never want to run both of those at the same time. It's always one from the list.
Right.
So
or ingress controllers is another one, but you can have multiple of those.
Yeah, and
storage providers.
Right. And the other thing here, John, is these tags are kind of like debated and used by the different SIGs. So some SIGs do better with the tagging stuff and other SIGs are not. So we basically tell them, like, they will come to us and say, what was the example? Like Windows would come and say, hey, we want to run a subset of the conformance test for Windows, and then we would like juggle things around and say, hey, go do this set of tags, and then they would do that, for example. So yes, we currently don't have a place to way to indicate that the specific thing is going to be conformant soon or something like that, right?
Yeah, or eventually, or
Right.
whatever. Okay, and it's mainly on a SIG to SIG level at this point.
Right.
Once this group decide or like says this is going to be tested, it's already GA, it should be, we'll handle the conformant tag, but that's the only one that we have a hand in.
Right. And maybe the other way to think about it is like maybe run one bucket of beta tests, but then that will get mixed up with it needs to be beta, and it needs to be like what we end up doing is conformance. If you turn on conformance, we switch off everything else, right? Like, so we have some rules like that, right? So if you switch on conformance, you should not have any tags by which people will like switch things off. So it's pretty convoluted, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was trying to clean up with for SIG node, and there is a CAP proposal I posted in the chat.
Right.
Another different difficulty in SIG node was that feature may indicate special environment that needed to run this feature, even though it's already GA, or it may indicate that there is a feature gate, which is completely different semantics. It may be on a path to conformance, or like not conformance in our case, but it's still marked as feature. So this CAP was intended to clean it up a little bit for SIG node, but also it spans across different SIGs. That's why I put it on SIG testing.
Okay.
I presented on a couple times, but not with SIG testing, so it's not accepted CAP yet. So it may clean up things a little bit when it's accepted, and we'll start doing it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that would be really useful if there was just this idea of that consistency, like you said, about does feature indicate it's a flag? Does it's different type of gate? It's triggered by this or that. If we had a couple tracks to better understand that it's honestly one of the main questions we get from Sonabui is, what tags are there? What should I do? How can I run things? And it's, it's hard when it's distributed and everyone's making different choices, but it's also pretty low priority when there's so many other things to do.
So we do have written down the rules that we currently follow. So if you want to take a look at that and see if we can propose something to the community to make it better, make things better, we'll end up coming, like if somebody comes up with like an idea of like, here is how we should do it going forward, then we can then go back and match the different use case scenarios that we ended up, why we started doing things the way we did. But that's going to be a long process.
Yeah,
and
we have 5,000
the other
tests.
problem is also, how do you define this across the currently maintained stable versions as well, right? So that would be the other problem that we'll face at that point.
Mm-hmm. Like cherry picking the changes to these tags into those older releases.
And then Sonoboy has to figure out, like, is this version where the tags are the new format or the older format, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be that's going to get trickier too.
Yeah, that's one place where we do sort of appreciate that things move slowly, because we can kind of just implement, we filter by these regexes, but honestly, we don't check the version and just choose the regex afterwards. We just hope the regex will be consistent across a smaller set of tests or a smaller set of versions. Okay, well, thank you all for chiming in and adding a little bit to our understanding, and we'll see where to go from there. But I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Two things that might help with the shape. Like, I don't know if it's directly relevant, but we have some tests that turn off alpha and beta. So it's GA only. And that's a run that I think Ben the Elder set up. That would help you look at what's the required side of.
Okay, so it's not looking at, it's not filtering conformance by
Jordan
tag,
set that
it's
up,
just
thanks.
turning off the other features and seeing what passes.
Yep. And
Okay.
that's an informing thing for us that we should probably look at once in a while and see how often that, like I don't know where the notifications go, but that's an important job. And then another one is there is for kubectl, I believe, a list, no, not kube, for API server, there's a -- help command or exploring, and you can look at all of the flags, because that's actually what we're looking for, is the features inside of API server there. And it tells you whether those individual features are on by default. And so there might be this overlap of check for the job that Jordan set up, and then for all of the flags that are on by default, and look at the tests that pass in that overlapping set. And that's
so basically the feature flag might be GA, but it's not on by default. So we have those scenarios as well.
I feel like there's a way where we could turn on GA and turn off all optional things, because that's where if we expand the concept of turn off alpha, turn off beta, and turn off all optional features. I'm not sure conformance would pass, to be honest.
Yeah, who knows what will happen at that point.
Anyway, I thought that would add to your thoughts on trying to understand the shape of Kubernetes. Those are your
thank you. I'm gonna look on the test grid for that that test run that you're saying Ben has, and I'll double check those feature flags for the API server and see if that could help us out. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And if you can review PRs that I sent, was it still helpful, or maybe leave some comments, it would be so appreciated.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. Sergey, you became host when I fell off due to internet access. So if you can pass that back on, I'll share my screen, or you can share the screen with the conformance meeting agenda. You go to participants, and there we are. Now I'm the host again. Thank you very much. Okay, let me share the screen. That one there. Okay, next topic is from Stephen. Right, API service test. So the background on this is RBAC, as we just discussed, is optional. So Stephen, we would like to use that, but we can't. So Stephen, you can lead the conversation.
The API service endpoints, they need quite a bit of setup, and the way that I've been doing it is using a image that's been used for some of the other historical endpoints around API service. And Jordan picked up the fact that because we were using RBAC as part of setting up the test, that started the whole discussion around the need for it. Sorry, it shouldn't be used because of course it's optional, and that led to those endpoints being made ineligible for now, maybe for a profile at a later date. But the problem is that the image that I'm currently using to set it up seems to be stuck and wanting RBAC to get that test actually up and running. And if I don't do that part, it just won't come up, the endpoints won't come up stably in a stable format for me to test. So I was actually hoping Clayton was going to be around to get a bit more of an insight, but maybe I can ping him, unless anyone's got any extra ideas, because I seem to be stuck in a catch-22 of I need RBAC based on the image that I'm using. And I have gone through the process of setting up a new image or getting a revision to an image, but it's just going to delay those endpoints getting tested. And also there's a potential issue around HA for the API service endpoint. There's one of the endpoints seems to have a bit of a glitch when I use it. And that comes back to the HA part. So that's the background on that test.
I guess at this point we can drop an email and instead of trying DM ping,
Yeah.
then we have something tracking that all of us can watch, right?
Yeah.
And this is the API service, so let's throw it out to the API missionary mailing list, and add Clayton explicitly, Clayton or Jordan, and Jordan, I guess.
Yeah, because both Clayton and Jordan have pinged in on the original issue.
Yeah.
It was just trying to find out what's the best way. Do we need a separate image that doesn't need the RBAC components so that the endpoints become available? But also it was if there's any other guides, so hopefully someone's got a potential extra documentation that may help me understand what's falling over or not falling over. So yeah, we'll look at getting something set there. Move to the next one, Rian.
All right, let's roll over to the next one. Thanks for that demo. Yeah, we'll send out that email and get some feedback from API machinery. Thanks. Next.
Okay. Rian, can you just open up the link for that controller Go?
I can do.
And okay, so if we scroll right to the bottom, I've got just that last section there. After setting up a daemon set, I've got it doing a list of all the revisions based on a label selector, and that's doing a list for all namespaces. for controller revisions. And after getting that list, then to start with, I'm doing a get to just look at reading the individual any particular revision that matches the same ID as the existing daemon set. So got those endpoints sorted out, but if we can open up the other link, controller revisions end up being a bit confusing in the sense of just keeping track. So at the bottom, I've got a list of, at the top, I've got some initial points around assumptions that I've got around some assumptions for controller revisions, how they're potentially working, and a few things around the hash that gets created. And we're trying to get some clear guidance around how the create and some of the update and patch process works, so that I can better track it using API Snoop. Because at the moment, it's not a well-used sort of, which is a popular endpoint that most people sort of think about resource, and I'm just having some issues just trying to find some extra functionality. And also the existing integration tests are using a fake client, and for the E2E test, I believe I should be using the real history option for working with the controller revisions, and I'm just wondering how that could cause some potential issues. And if you that very last link on that page there, yeah, that one there on for that line 235. It's like I'm inside looking at one of the controller revisions. Sorry, if you scroll up just a fraction further to get the start of the sorry, to get the name of the function. Create controller revision, and yet after it does a little bit of a setup, the line that I've highlighted is where it's actually doing another another callback out to say, hey, now let's actually do the call to actually create it. And this is where I'm sort of like losing the thread of where stuff's happening within the control plane. It's like I thought I was in the right place for the create part, but it's like I've sort of come full circle and I'm losing who is now actually really dealing with that bit of the create process. Because at the start of the file, at the very top round, there is there's a reference about a new controller revision resource. Sorry, if we just scroll down a little bit. Constant, yeah, line 66. Function create a new controller revision. It's trying to work out the plumbing between that create and how that new controller revision. So
can I summarize real quick what I hear you saying? Because some of this is maybe not straightforwardly clear. Is we're trying to implement a test that does what the controller normally does in interacting with the API server. And we don't consider coverage for conformance unless the E2E test suite is the API user agent communicating to the API server. So we're trying to implement some of the logic inside of the controller, in this case, the controller history, to be able to generate the correct names within our E2E test, trying to do the conformance for controller. It's a mouthful, but it helps to provide some clarity for that longer discussion.
Thank you, Happy. So I've got an initial call out to SIG apps on this already done. So I think I'll probably need to reping them, maybe email their mailing list, probably. Sorry.
Who did you
think-
ping, Stephen? Was it Mache? Or
Yeah, if in Slack, I posted about a week ago this this document that we just had up just before, asking for feedback, as well as the case conformance with a link back to the SIG Apps Slack channel. And he said he was going to have a look at it, but I think he's just snowed under with stuff.
yeah.
It's just these endpoints for the control revision, they're the last to get done for SIG Apps to get 100% coverage. And I'd really like to get it done this release.
Yeah, let's do the same thing. SIG Apps mailing list, let's hit them up.
Yeah.
And today, tomorrow, it's going to be difficult to get anything out of people because of the feature caps deadline.
Okay.
So we should probably we should send the mailing list, and then we should reach back out to them on like Monday on Slack, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah, that would be a beautiful win if we can catch these endpoints, because that's the only thing that's left that makes apps 100% tested, which would be a beautiful day. Thanks for that, Stephen.
Thank you.
Let's roll over to Sergey. Nice to see you here. You can take the stage.
Oh, I just have a small question, and I want to pick your brain on what would be the best approach here. So there is a pod overhead feature that we GA this release, and this pod overhead feature, if you're not familiar with that, you can specify runtime class, and runtime class can specify overhead, and this overhead will be applied to every pod that using this runtime class. And then the result of it will be that C groups will be allocated with more memory or more CPU, depending, like just overhead will be added to the C group sizes. So since we GA this feature, I was curious, what can we do to do we want to do conformance of that? And the complication here is how do I test conformance of the feature? So I can test that the pod will be like overhead will be added to the pod, but I don't really have a way to validate that C groups will be allocated with the proper additional size. Nor I can I don't even know like how it will work on Windows and what do I check on Windows. So do you have any suggestions? Do I just test part of a feature and don't test that kubelet allocated enough or additional memory and CPU? Is there any precedence on people testing this kind of things?
I had a look at the test plan layout. That link able to be brought up, because at the end of your test plan, you're looking at doing a lot of work with kubelet, and on the conformance test requirements, I think there's a lot of issues around interacting with kubelet directly. That makes the endpoint that it doesn't meet the conformance test requirements. I'm just not sure if there's any other way around not needing to talk with kubelet for this test to work.
I'm trying to remember the specifics around conformance tests can't interact with kubelet. That's like 3 or 4 years ago. My brain's not
correct. Yeah, so
the specifics.
The only thing that we can check is what is accessible through the API server only, right? So, and if this thing that we are switching on, if it doesn't result in a change in what we get back from the API server upon querying later, then there is nothing we can do about it. And we can't basically test add it to conformance at that point.
Theoretically,
Okay.
kubelet might not exist.
Right.
It might do some other fancy cloud thing. As long as the API server and our surface area that's part of conformance is good.
Right.
Um,
So some other things won't even have C groups, right? Like Windows you were saying. So I think this can't be a candidate for conformance.
Okay. If I will find a way to check for available memories at the left on a node,
Mhm.
will it be something that I can do? Like, can I can I just take a dependency on that available memory decreased in that amount? Or I shouldn't?
I think that is, I mean, if we are able to, we should be able to check the memory on the node, right? And the memory changes. That is observable through API server for sure.
We cannot observe. I mean, it will run in parallel with other tests, so I cannot rely on this decrease unless I do it serial, right?
Exactly. And then that serial, if we can't allow serial tests. No, we
No,
do
we
we
can allow
allow
serial
we
tests in
do serial
conformance.
tests, yeah.
Right. Same as
Oh,
SIG,
good.
run
Yeah,
as serial.
But then, are we going to do this on every node, or we get into that thing? We can't, like, how do you know which node you were trying to make a change, or do you make a change in all the nodes?
Yeah. And in general, even configuring runtime class on a node is maybe problematic for conformance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So I guess simplest will be just to validate that admission worked and we applied the overhead to the pod, but then we wouldn't check the functionality.
Right.
That it will actually, okay.
Yeah. But
Okay,
then I
thank
don't know
you.
whether that is enough to bump it into conformance. So
Yeah.
yes, at least let's do that. Let's see what we can do, and then we can debate again on the conformance aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was it.
And once you have the test up and running and you care for some checking with whether APIs need to pick it up, touching the endpoints, you can reach out to myself or Stephen or Hippie, and we can help you with API Snoop, or you can just download it and run it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it will cover more APIs because runtime class is already covered. It's just field on runtime class. So I'm not sure whether API Snoop will pick it up.
Right.
All right, that concludes our agenda points. Anything else that somebody want to add? And I thank you very much, and you get 20 minutes of your day back. And thanks for all the inputs.
Yeah. See some of you on the next call. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.